Hi there, Vibe Gardeners. Welcome to another episode of Vibe Gardening Inform Edition, where I'm going to talk about how I accidentally created a hotel aphid and how I also figured out how to perform eviction on all the guests in this hotel. With that said, let's go. All right, guys. So if you've been a gardener for a while, you'll be pretty aware of what aphids are. They're essentially soft body insects that's going to cluster around any tender green plants and try to eat all the stem leaves, stems, or anything that's basically tender flesh. And they will also secrete sweet, sugary sap, essentially, that will attract a lot of ants around them. So one of the ways that you'll notice that you have an aphid infection or infestation is you will see a ton of ants swarming together and just aimlessly roaming around a section. And you will see a black cluster around it, and that's essentially an aphid infestation. And so I'm going to go into kind of why they would pick your plant and talk about how this Cosmo right here accidentally created the same effect and talk about what happened last year with my chamomile as a little history. And then I'm going to go into what I'm doing differently this year and how I'm seeing effects already taking place. Now, with that said, here we go. So to talk a little bit of the history of aphid. So last year I first really encountered them when I was growing chamomile in my backyard, and which I'll go into a little bit in another episode. I basically put them on a pretty heavy fertilizer regimen, and I would end up giving them a lot of, which I'll get into a little bit. So when I feed a lot of fertilizer, I noticed that the aphid really starts appearing. At that point, I didn't know what was happening. What I know was aphid was essentially killing the chamomile. And as you will notice from my friend's channel here, Indiana Funny Farm, from her videos talking about her tomatoes and all that stuff, they're essentially being killed by the aphid from indoor plant starts. That's something that a lot of professional growers, I talked to Jacob's Fresh Farm, the CSA I belong to, they also talk about in greenhouse how aphid infestation can be a big problem. So get into a little bit about actually more they can do than what I've had to do that has helped them. And essentially what happens is that it's a big problem in seed starts, but that's when the plants are most tender and young. And that's become a real issue. But for me, what I done was I did something a little different in that because of my heavy fertilization, the heavy nitrogen basically encourages the aphid to really like the tender amino acid heavy plants that or the flesh on these plants that's being generated. So right now I've actually done something different here to fix my problem with these cosmos this year. That really is something I found out with my chamomile last year, in that the chamomile really was essentially dying from the aphid attacking it. And now granted, they're pretty hardy camos I have, so it didn't really kill them so much, but it definitely shortened the life in that I essentially let it dry out and died of, water dehydration, which, it kind of shows you how new I was to planting these things. And so the one thing I did this year differently was I stopped fertilizing the chamomiles, and the chamomiles have yet to have any aphid whatsoever. But with these cosmos, I made the same mistake of adding fertilizer. I used the Miracle Grow all-purpose, and there was a lot of aphid on it. And the moment I switched to the bloom booster, the aphid and the ant party they attract has essentially reduced down to zero, because there's really nothing for them to really be attracted to right here. As a matter of fact, if the aphids come back, I'll actually probably pull back completely on fertilization of any kind, because they probably don't need it, because the chamomile, as I discovered, really don't need any fertilization, as they actually thrive better with lean soil. So to give you guys a little bit of a close-up here, this is what the cosmos look like right now. So before, what happened was I found a cluster of black dots, essentially on this stem here. And then also up here, in the near the where the flower is now, before the flower came. And I saw a lot of ants kind of crawling around, which as you can see right here, if I kind of go down, you'll see that there's still a little bit of ant activity going on here. It's hard to get them to stay still, obviously, but there is an ant in here that you'll see a little bit crawling around. And so that tells you that there used to be a remnant of aphid here, and the ant activity has been reducing down significantly now. In that it used to be about a half dozen of them. Now I only see maybe 2 in the whole entire cluster of 4 cosmos, and that tells me that this new reduction in nitrogen is heavily working in my favor, and it's reducing the type of food that attracts aphid. So to kind of show you this here, what's been going on with the chamomile, as you can see, there's really no activity of any kind of insect whatsoever at the top with a leaf. And this is showing me that this year, whatever I'm doing is correct, in that I actually have completely left the plant alone of any fertilizer. And as you can see here, even though it's very dense and lush, as you can see with the flower heads here, it's coming up still very healthy with absolutely no black spots or any sign of ant activity on these plants. And that is a testament of the fact that chamomile should not need any kind of fertilizer, in that this is just pure raised bed soil, organic kind for Miracle-Gro. And it's just doing perfectly fine. And that is a lesson on over-fertilization is indeed actually a problem. I think I finally found an actual aphid colony. If you go in close here, you will see that, see how it's protecting this cluster of dark here. I'll take a photo for the thumbnail, but you see the group here, and the way I do it is basically take my thumb and I would just crush it. There you go. Aphid infestation taken care of. And the ant's like, what happened to my source of sugar? Alright guys, so if you're like me, you're probably wondering how the professionals actually deal with aphid infestations, because my case is very rare in that I really don't have any source of aphid indoors, which is actually, for seed starting, that's the main problem most people talk about. My problem comes from me being stupid when it comes to over-fertilizing my plants. And that's something that you can learn from as well. You want to see which plants really you should be leaving alone. When they germinate, it's mostly flowers, and that should actually help you quite a bit. But when it comes to actual professionals and the seed starters who see aphid in seed starting, what do people actually do? So, been talking to Indiana Funny Farm, so Kim from the channel has told me that she basically uses spray with wood ash, and that actually irritates aphid and keeps them from growing on the plant. Another thing that the professional growers or people who have a lot of problems with the seed starter do, they talked to Jacob at Jacob Fresh Farm and Anna, his wife, and they both mentioned that they have a lot of beneficial insect that preys on them in their greenhouse. So they would bring in beneficial mite, and they also would bring in ladybugs. So when you go into their greenhouse, you will see a lot of ladybugs crawling around, as well as you see these little bit of plastic bags with what looks like grain in those bags hanging over the plants. And those are the ones that basically are transits for the beneficial mites. And you see them, if you look very closely, you will see little critters hopping around. And that's generally how people do it. Now, if you're really desperate, people use neem oil for the organic way. But as I'll get into with a later episode on pollinators, for the sake of my pollinators and the other insects I love around my garden, I don't use neem oil if I don't have to. But for these guys right here, what I did when I found the cluster was, first of all, I changed my feeding regimen, which helped quite a bit. What I did was I used my fingers, and then I crushed them with my fingers, which is pretty nasty, I know, but it works. I crushed them, and then I did a light spray of neem oil on there to make sure they don't come back. Because when I caught this guy here with the neem on it, what I did at that time, it was only 2 clusters of aphid. So it was very much controllable, and I basically squashed them with my fingers and sprayed neem oil to prevent future infestation, and it absolutely worked out. Like I said, right now with all 4 of these plants, I probably saw only 2 ants crawling around. And what used to be even a tiny little speck of aphid, I don't see them anymore. So I think I really controlled it now by actually doing responsible fertilization. So that's how you really kind of take care of it from the 2-prong, not producing food for it, and also if you need to, bring in the beneficial insects to take care of business. All right, guys, so this is about a short episode on hotel aphid, how I accidentally created it, and how I evicted the guest in this hotel that I never wanted to create in the first place. So hopefully that's going to give you some idea of how to control aphid. And if you got any other great ways that you've used to take care of business, please comment below so we can all talk about it a little bit. And again, subscribe for more content like this. And until next time, keep gardening and keep vibing. Let's go.